All right. Must we? Must we talk about the convention from this weekend? Man, I'll tell you, 72 hours of absolute vitriol hurled at me by Semi Bird supporters. I said
Typical.
in a speech about a month ago that Semi Bird was present for, like, look, I'm not going to waste more precious time attacking Semi Bird. The real villain here is Bob Ferguson. And I'll support anyone who makes it past the primary to go against Bob Ferguson. Anyone. As I said on Twitter last night, I support an old sock. A sock puppet. Like sock puppet 2024 if it's a sock puppet versus Bob Ferguson. So I really want Semi Bird supporters to know that. I mean, they're calling me a Democrat online and a socialist. And it's like, wow, that just tells me you're not interested in having any sort of dialogue. And that's also a very leftist mentality. Like the left is the one that's supposed to be demanding purity of everyone and attacking the moderates. That's what you see from the socialists, the democratic socialists, the uber progressives, the pro-Hamas faction. They attack the moderates of their party. They're doing that today. We can talk a little bit about that. And then now we have the right that's been making fun of the left for that for so long, and the extreme right's like, oh, Brandi's a socialist and a Democrat. Why? Because I support like a lifelong conservative. Come on, that's just absurd. And if you're doing that, I just can't take you seriously as a human being, honestly. So anyway, this weekend was crazy. So there was a GOP convention. And this year, as you know, it was going to operate differently in an effort to unite the party. They decided that the party would do official endorsements. There was like 2,000 delegates that came from across the state. And for all the key races and individual, district races, they were going to have an official endorsement. And what that means, or was supposed to mean, is that the person who got the official endorsement in any given race, they would have, the party would solely support them through the primary. So they would, any sort of funding, help fundraising, or anything like that, the party, it's basically is not going to recognize any other candidates that continue to stay in the race. And GOP candidates were asked to sign a pledge that says, if I don't get the endorsement, I'll drop out before the filing deadline. So the idea was to unite the party together, to have a united front moving toward the primary and not have this Republican infighting that distracts from the bigger picture, right? Which is eliminating one-party rule in the state of Washington. Well, that didn't work. And I will say, if you were hoping for unity at this convention, you didn't get it. The first inkling I got that things were going downhill, and I'll share a picture here, was Jamie Herrera Butler, former congresswoman who voted to impeach Trump, and now the Trump wing of the party despises her, which I'm sure is not a surprise to her. So she's running for commissioner of public lands. We've had her on the show to talk about her campaign. And she shows up to give her speech in front of the delegates. And I guess I'm not terribly surprised that a big chunk of them stood up and turned their backs to her. Some were yelling "Rhino" at her, and some were chanting Trump. And honestly, I saw that and I'm like, children. I was like, really? And some people in the room, when I criticized this, were like, Brandi, this is America and that's free speech. I get it. I believe in free speech, but it doesn't mean you have to act like an ass. You're talking about candidates who agree with you on 90% of things. But because Jamie Herrera Butler, after a long record of tried and true conservatism, voted her conscience and voted to impeach Trump and then moved on from it, you're going to boo and hiss at her when she has the balls, not literally. I mean, who knows these days, I guess, but to stand up there knowing that there are people in the room who just hate her over the Trump impeachment, and to still stand up there and talk about why she wants the job of commissioner of public lands. And I mean, a big chunk of the room to turn their backs to her and to boo and hiss. So when that happened, I was like, Dave Reichert shouldn't be there. That's what I thought in my mind, is like, he needs to leave. He needs to leave because I could see how it was devolving into a non-serious convention. And I think beneath a candidate who has such a strong moral compass. And I thought, if not for anything, to stick up for Jamie, he should get up and walk out. And I had tweeted as much. Well, then I found out, not long after I had tweeted that Dave hadn't actually been at the convention. He was sort of waiting to see how the Gov endorsement thing was going to work. He decided, given the chaos, and I'll get to more of it in a moment, that he was going to withdraw his name from consideration. So Dave Reichert sent out a tweet saying, in the past 24 hours, it has become clear that some in the Washington State Republican Party are in such disarray that they're considering making no endorsement for governor. This after they continually changed rules, broke rules, and twisted the process to accomplish their desired outcome. I'm not here to fix the party, but to fix our broken state. Given these deceptive and dishonest events, I'm withdrawing my name for consideration for the gubernatorial endorsement through this convention process. I'm still seeking the endorsement of Republicans statewide and reconfirm my intention to fight for the state as a Republican all the way to November. My focus continues to be on fixing what's broken and doing what's right. That begins by beating Bob Ferguson. So here's kind of what happened behind the scenes. So it turned out that Semi Bird, so we kind of knew going into the convention that Semi Bird's team had done a very good job at securing support from delegates. And I'm going to give him a lot of credit for that. And so it kind of seemed clear that he had more support among the party loyalists and the Trump loyalists. And so going into the convention, it kind of seemed like the GOP was ready to nominate Semi Bird. Except then there's this vetting process that all candidates have to go through to get the official nomination and endorsement. Well, Semi Bird wasn't honest on his application. He did not tell them about, I think, a 1993 larceny conviction where he admitted, to using his father's social security number in an effort basically to defraud a bank. And that came out a few days ago before the convention in the Times. And Semi Bird confessed to it, just kind of the latest in a track record of things he's had in his past. I want to play for you a video from the Linwood Times from in the room when it was announced that Semi Bird was ineligible to be endorsed by the party. And so they said, we're not going to put up any candidate. This is before Dave had already officially dropped out. We're not going to endorse in the governor's race. And that's the response you heard from the crowd and, the Semi Bird crowd. And Semi Bird's in the front row egging them on. Come on, Semi. He's egging them on. And he's pointing at the stage. They're calling the lady up there a coward. Come on. Really crazy stuff. And I get a couple things. I've promised you guys I'll always call balls and strikes. You know that I support Dave Reichert, but that doesn't mean he's above criticism. Dave should have showed up at the convention. When I encouraged him on social media over the weekend to walk away from the process, I did not realize that he actually didn't show up at all to the convention. That's a mistake. You had people who paid with their own money to go there as Reichert delegates, to support him, to volunteer for him, to sign wave. He should have shown up. And I know he probably expected to get booed and jeers and all of that. But, Jamie took her lumps on stage. I do think he should have showed up, shook hands, thanked his supporters, stood at the door. And if Semi Bird supporters wanted to be rude to him, then by all means. So I am going to knock Dave for that. He should have shown up. But I agree with his decision to withdraw. Given that, that's embarrassing. And all the media coverage across the state was like, GOP convention, like they're just not serious. It was crazy and all that. It makes the party look absolutely incompetent. It made the whole process look unserious. And I actually think it helps Dave to not have the endorsement of that disaster and to have walked away. Because I think he does need to, he's been focused on November and beating Bob Ferguson. And to me, not getting the endorsement, now he can be that more independent-minded person that I think a lot of voters are looking for. So that doesn't bother me. Now, Dave's still in the race, obviously. He didn't sign the pledge. And now there's Semi Bird people who are mad, like, Dave needs to drop out. Look, Semi Bird hasn't raised any money. He only has donations from 1,700 people in like a 15-month campaign. And Dave's campaign has been much shorter, and he's got 9,000 individual donations. So you can't, it's not like, I hate this because I gave my word to Semi Bird that I would focus on Bob, and I am going to be focused on Bob. But with you haven't come out and said, stop attacking people for not agreeing with us. We need to bring all these people along. No, a lot of your supporters have been downright nasty. Downright nasty. And the way that you behaved in the front row, pointing up while this woman was being screamed at and called a coward and just, mean mugging them and saying, this is America. You were egging it on. And that is not how a governor behaves. And so I'm going to say that. It doesn't mean I won't support your campaign if you get past the primary. Because, anyone over Bob Ferguson, 100%. But so all this went down, and Semi Bird actually ended up getting the endorsement because through their convention rules, the delegates can vote to bypass the rules. So he was disqualified for not being honest about this bank larceny conviction. The delegates decide to bypass those rules, and Semi Bird gets the endorsement. So now we're in a situation, and not just Semi Bird, by the way. They endorsed a whole list of Republican candidates in the big races, many of whom I've never even heard of. They didn't endorse Jamie Herrera Butler in the Commissioner of Public Lands race. Sue Keel, I think, Peterson. They endorsed the more pro-Trump people. I've never heard of her. And I live and breathe in this space. I don't know who that is. It was the same with the OSPI race, Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. They didn't endorse Chad Mogendans. They endorsed somebody I've never heard of in my life. So it was like this very anti-establishment movement, which I get it. People feel like they've been let down by the establishment or whatever it is. But going further to the right in a blue state is it's not the answer, right? That's not going to help. That's how you end up with a Lauren Culp situation where he loses by 500,000 votes. That's how you do that. So anyway, when I saw how absolutely just embarrassing people acted, there were videos of fights. There was a fight between a guy in a Trump shirt who was pushing a Reichert delegate. Apparently that became a police matter or something. Really embarrassing stuff. So I figured, since a lot of the adults in the room were acting like children, I decided to bring on probably the youngest person who was at the convention to give us her perspective on their behavior as a 16-year-old. I'm, of course, talking about Kellyanna Brooking. She's an independent journalist, and she is a Republican. And she went to cover the convention, so we had her on yesterday on Sundays with Subscribers to give her, again, take as a 16-year-old for how these adults acted at a state convention. Jim Walsh, the chairman of the Washington State Republican Party, was on Twitter sort of suggesting, the media is blowing this out of proportion. It wasn't chaotic. It wasn't chaos. How would you describe it, having been there?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I do like Jim Walsh. I think he did a pretty decent job at moderating without giving in to the crazies, which was nice to see. I think saying it wasn't chaotic is a complete lie because it very much was. Being there and not having to, that's another great thing about reporting is you don't have to give your opinion. You don't have to align with what's going on. You can just observe and watch and stand back and ask questions. But yeah, the event was absolutely chaotic, and regardless of your opinions on a candidate, Jamie Herrera Butler, I had an opportunity to interview her for a few minutes, and she was sweet to me and it was great. And regardless of your opinions on her, when she went up to speak, people that hated her stood up, turned around, and were yelling at her and booing her and screaming out "Rhino" and calling her these horrible names. Everybody was standing up and turning their backs towards her like literal children. What scares me about that is that these grown adults are registered to vote. These are registered voters that are not mature enough to grasp the concept that somebody can have a different perspective than them. She was literally just giving a speech explaining what the land commissioner does, and they were not mature enough to hear that. It was chaos, especially when the Semi Bird news broke out. People were throwing signs, people were screaming, people were yelling and protesting and tweeting and it was insane. And these are registered voters, Brandi, and that's really scary to me.
I love this. A 16-year-old being like, I'm scared that these adults are registered voters. You can watch that full interview with Kellyanna Brooking, who joined us from the convention for Sundays with Subscribers, undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. But I just think that's a perspective like that for those adults who behave that way. That's how you came across to a 16-year-old girl who was in the room. That's the example that you set to a 16-year-old Republican. And I've had some variation of, again, oh my gosh, social media was brutal to me over the weekend. It's like, I fight for and agree with 99% of what you do, but because I have a criticism of your clearly inappropriate behavior, I'm now a Democrat, socialist, horrible person. Somebody's like, you're going to lose all your subscribers over this. Okay. Like I said, I think we're going to be fine, but if I lose subscribers by calling out the behavior of people who I mostly agree with, that I'm more concerned about maintaining my moral clarity than maintaining that. But okay, what was I going to say? So there was, one of the complaints people had about my just being aghast at this situation is, oh, well, Brandi, this is democracy. This is just passionate people who are fighting for to have the voice of we the people heard. It's like, okay, I love that. I love people who are passionate about politics. You don't have to be disrespectful to do that. You don't have to be blatantly disrespectful and absolutely incapable of understanding that there are people who might have reasonable disagreements with you. You don't have to do that while also fighting for your voice and fighting for democracy. So that's just ridiculous. Like, don't give me that line. And I'd also say to this we the people crowd, everyone is we the people. I hate to say it, but even the left-wingers are we the people. That's what this country was built on. The second that you think we the people is some sort of inclusive or exclusive club is the second that you've truly lost, I think, all sense of what we the people stands for. And there's this other, element of this, and gosh, I know I'm just getting into the weeds here. There's this also element of that bothers me, that you think it's more we the people for 2,000 people to choose who gets to go to the primary than for voters to choose who gets past the primary. That seems counterintuitive to me. All right, so Democrats had a field day with this, and I would, hell. But first, let me just say of Democrats, they're not innocent. We would all be sitting here making fun of Democrats if they had a convention and the left-wing, like Hamas crowd got up and was shouting at, Kim Schreier or whatever it is, or Adam Smith. I would have been just as disappointed and made fun of their behavior and criticized their behavior as I would. So let's not act like the chaos and the fringe behavior is exclusive to the right. It is far more prevalent on the left in Washington state. But I don't blame them for having a field day with it. Washington Democrats, the Republican Party is a party of dysfunction and chaos. We see it in Congress with Trump, and we see it right here in Washington with the WAGOP. They're having a hard time endorsing one of two anti-abortion candidates running for governor this year. Bob Ferguson, the contrast in our race is clear this weekend. While Congressman Dave Reichert was quitting the chaotic Republican convention, Nicole, can you pull up the Bob Ferguson thing? The contrast in our race is clear this weekend. While Congressman Dave Reichert was quitting the chaotic Republican convention because things weren't going his way, I was speaking to King 5 about my team's work collecting nearly 3,000 DNA samples from violent offenders. Unlike anti-choice Republican Dave Reichert, I will never quit on you when things get tough. This guy. First of all, the guy who he doesn't fight for you. He just stays quiet. He stays silent when it matters most. And I started this running list on Twitter of all the things that Bob Ferguson never spoke out about. And he just stayed silent because it was politically palatable. And now he's saying, I won't quit on you when things get tough. No, you'll just retreat into your little safe space and just try to not say anything that'll offend your voting base. Just absurd. But you notice Bob Ferguson, he's not attacking Semi Bird. He's attacking Dave Reichert. That's because he knows that Dave Reichert is his likely November primary challenger. And look, again, I don't want to act like, I don't care if you support Semi Bird. It doesn't change my mind about who I'm supporting. The nomination process doesn't change my mind. I'm not a Republican. Why would I be beholden to a Republican nominating process? Support Semi Bird. That's fine. But don't attack people viciously for supporting a candidate who has raised more money from more people, who has near universal name recognition, and who's doing exceptionally well in the polls. Because you're in the minority when it comes to who you support. So don't act like it's some absolute offense or I'm some awful person who you should get on social media and be vitriolic about because I support a candidate who more people support than your candidate. So don't give me that. If you're going to be crazy about it, like, I'll push back against it. So can't put baby in a box.